Day 684 of the Trump administration, and special counsel Robert Mueller is tonight recommending little or no prison time for former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who pleaded guilty 1 year ago to lying to the FBI to cover up his discussions with Russia's ambassador to the U.S. Just a few hours ago, the cryptic Mueller team filed a sentencing memo for Flynn in federal court here in Washington. The documents note that, quote, given the defendant's substantial assistance and other considerations, a sentence at the low end of the guideline range, including a sentence that does not impose a term of incarceration, is appropriate and warranted. An additional memo lays out how Flynn helped Mueller's investigation, but as you can see, a lot of it is blacked out, and that in itself is telling, as we'll discuss in a moment. It does show that Flynn, quote, has assisted with several ongoing investigations, telling again, including an investigation concerning any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Trump, and that he, quote, participated in 19 interviews with the feds and provided documents and communications. This filing notes that Flynn started working with the government not long after it first sought his cooperation. We quote again, his early cooperation was particularly valuable because he was one of the few people with long-term and first-hand insight regarding events and issues under investigation by the SCO, the special counsel's office. The Mueller team also notes, quote, the defendant's military and public service are exemplary. He served in the military for over 33 years, including 5 years of combat duty, led the Defense Intelligence Agency, and retired as a 3-star lieutenant general. The defendant's record of military and public service distinguish him from every other person who has been charged. However, senior government leaders should be held to the highest standards. You may recall Flynn was an advisor to Trump's campaign and, along with the candidate back then, helped to lead the attack on Hillary Clinton.
Lock her up. Lock her up. You guys are good. Damn right. You're exactly right. There's nothing wrong with that.
After Donald Trump won the election, President Obama reportedly warned him not to hire Flynn. Flynn was, in fact, tapped, however, as National Security Advisor on November 17. On December 1, Flynn and Jared Kushner met with the Russian ambassador, who later told Moscow that Kushner asked about setting up back channel for communications between the Trump team and the Kremlin. Later that month, Flynn spoke with Kislyak, the ambassador, more than once, including after Obama imposed sanctions on Russia for election meddling. Flynn was sworn in as National Security Advisor January 22nd of 2017. By that time, news of his conversations about the Russian ambassador had emerged, and Vice President Mike Pence had been asking about them. 2 days after his swearing in, Flynn was interviewed by the FBI. January 26, then Acting Attorney General Sally Yates told the White House about Flynn lying and potentially being vulnerable to blackmail. February 9, the Washington Post reveals Flynn talked with Ambassador Kislyak about sanctions. And on February 13th, Flynn stepped down. The White House said Flynn was fired for misleading Pence and other senior officials about his discussions with Kislyak. The next day, at a private Oval Office meeting, Trump brought up Flynn with then FBI Director James Comey, who later made immediate and contemporaneous notes of their conversation. Comey was asked about that during a Senate hearing in June 2017.
You wrote down the words so we can all have the words in front of us now. There's 28 words there that are in quotes, and it says, quote, I hope, this is the president speaking, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, those are his exact words. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let's bring in our leadoff panel on this Tuesday night. Cynthia Oxney is here with us, a former federal prosecutor and a veteran of the Justice Department who has worked in the past with one Robert Mueller. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner is with us, happens to have also worked with Robert Mueller. And Matthew Miller, former chief spokesman for the Department of Justice. Good evening and welcome to you all. Cynthia, I'd like to begin with you. What did you learn from this document and what stands out?
Well, I wish I learned more.
Yeah, there's a lot of blacking.
There's a lot of blacking out. Like, there's no ink in my printer anymore at home, and I'm a little bitter about it. But aside from that and the obvious things, the one thing that's standing out to me now is the White House has got to be pretty nervous because, you know, there is no joint defense agreement with Flynn, nor should there be because he's cooperating. But the White House has broken rules with Manafort. But there's no joint defense agreement. So they realize he's given substantial assistance, and they don't know what it is. And one of the people who comes up with Flynn time and time again is Kushner. It's the way you mentioned there's a discussion of the sanctions. There's setting up that back channel. There's the UN agreement, the UN motion on Israel's settlements. All that happened with Flynn and with Kushner. And now we know that Robert Mueller believes Flynn, and he's been helpful. He's brought other people in to cooperate. He's brought documents. He has emails, and he's shared it all. Were I Kushner, I would be on the phone to my friend Abby Lowell right now saying, uh-oh.
Glenn, I heard it said on this network tonight two things. That number one, this is like a reverse Groundhog Day. This document tonight means we've got at least 6 months more of this because there's tangents and tranches that they've yet to go down, Corsi and Stone among them. Number two, that this document shows job security on the part of Robert Mueller. He's not, because of all this black ink we're talking about, this is not Mueller saying, okay, everybody, this is what we have so far. This is Mueller saying we have a lot, we're retaining a lot, and we're moving on. Do you concur?
I do. I think those are both fair inferences, Brian, from what we see here. I really think one of the stories is the redactions. We've all been surmising that, you know, we must be close. Mueller is probably preparing to drop a big conspiracy indictment any day now. I think when we see that there was so much redacted out of this sentencing memo that Mueller feels like there's a lot he is not yet prepared to share with the American people or with the court in this memo. I think he has a lot of work to do, so perhaps we do have 6 more weeks of winter. And I do think all of these redactions tend to show he has no sense of urgency at this moment. He does not feel the need to all of a sudden get in front of an acting Attorney General Whitaker who might be looking to rein him in or tamp him down. He is content to do things on his own timetable, in his own way, and he didn't feel the need to put a whole bunch of information into the public square in this memo. So I think both of those inferences are fairly drawn from these documents.
Matt, my first question for you is procedural. I just heard myself again using that word back channel to Russia. That's inaccurate. What they were trying to set up, I believe, was a workaround. Back channel we have. It's the red phone. It was put in at the height of bad relations to keep things from boiling over. This was not that, and this was not a thing. This would have been something extraordinary that Kushner was talking about. That's point one. Point two, in your view, why should, to Cynthia's point, the Trump administration be so worried about this guy, General?
So I think on point one, the best way to think of what they were doing is they were trying to establish a secret channel with Russia.
That's just you and us talk.
That's right, that no one in the U.S. government could overhear. And they were trying to do it using, remember, Russian communications equipment. I think Jared Kushner proposed maybe he could come over to the Russian embassy and use Russian equipment to communicate with people in the Kremlin. It's hard to imagine what it was they needed to have that they were so worried about the sitting U.S. government monitoring at the time. So I think that is the important point. Second, with respect to what was the second question?
Why is he so dangerous to the Trump administration?
Yeah, why is he? So I think the thing that I found most interesting in this filing is it's not just that Mike Flynn is cooperating with respect to the Russia investigation. If you read the filing, it's clear he's cooperating with at least 2. It's hard to tell because of the redactions. I think a more likely reading is that he's cooperating with 3 investigations. We don't know what all of those are, but it's clear in the memo that he's cooperating with other offices outside of the special counsel's office. It notes that he's met with other offices. Those could relate to this other thing we know that Mueller has been looked at that related to this very complicated meeting between the UAE and a couple of lobbyists, Elliot Broidy and George Nader. We know that Mike Flynn sat in a meeting with Jared Kushner and the Crown Prince of the UAE during the transition that's been under scrutiny. That could be one of the matters. It could be something completely different. We don't know, and the point is the president and no one else in the White House or the administration knows either. That must be terrifying to them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.